We're looking ahead in the political season now. We're looking ahead to the race for Henderson Mayor. Michelle Romero, one of the candidates for mayor on the council right now. Thank you for joining us to talk a little bit about this campaign on the horizon. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
So you've already declared that you're running for mayor of Henderson. You've been involved in city politics and in city government for some time. Just as mayor, what are some of the main things that you would like to see changed if you were able to be mayor?
Not necessarily changed, but things I want to improve upon and add upon. We've already built a really great base in Henderson. It's a great place to be. It's a great place to do business. The four things that I want to focus on as mayor are public safety first, education second, transparency in government, and economic development and diversifying our economy and the efforts that we've already started to do.
Let's take take all of those one at a time here. Talking about public safety, there's been some movement with regards to the Henderson Police Department for the last couple of years. The old police chief left. There's litigation, I think, still ongoing with that. Instead of focusing on that, let's just talk more about trying to bridge the gap at City Hall between the department, the union, and the community. How would you achieve that?
You know, I'm already working on that. I work with our police department on a daily basis almost. I meet with them regularly. I reach out to our captain that's in charge of my ward. I get information on what's happening with not only the community, but with the police officers themselves. You know, they experience things that we never want to see. They're there when we're on our worst day. And so I have developed that rapport with them, and I have a great respect for the work that they do. And Henderson is known as one of the safest cities in America, and it's for a reason. It's because safety is priority for us. And we continue to work to make sure they have the tools necessary to keep themselves safe, to keep them on the cutting edge of technology, and to make sure that they recognize that they're valued, their life is important to us, and that their safety is first as well.
Was the transition at the head of the police department satisfactory in your mind as someone who on the council at the time? Do you think the city has handled that appropriately?
So I wasn't on the council at the time of the transition, but I believe, based on the information that I have, that it was a good decision. And you know, I meet with the new chief on a regular basis. He does a really good job of making sure that I'm aware of what's happening with his force, the things that are important to them, and the things that maybe are on the horizon that we need to really focus on to make sure that we continue to be safe as we continue to grow.
Another issue you brought up is education. One of your stances is trying to separate Henderson with its own school district, I believe.
It is.
There's been a long-standing effort to try and separate CCSD. How would you achieve this goal of getting Henderson its own school district?
Well, I think we're starting to lay the groundwork now. Henderson is the only city in the valley that has its own community education advisory board. And through that board, we use 30% of our marijuana funds and 18% of our redevelopment funds to directly fund Henderson public schools. And so we've set the groundwork already for identifying a funding source and for ensuring that our residents know that education is top priority. The next thing I've asked our staff to do, and that is already underway, is to looking into whether or not we can form our own charter school system, so that we get that already in place and there's an alternative. It'll take a while to break up the school district, as you just mentioned. And so we've already done that by establishing a pre-K program to make pre-K available to all children in Henderson. We have our own, it's operating at full capacity, and it's doing wonderfully well. So I'd like to take that to the next level and open a charter school and have that same result as we continue to work on and allowing municipalities to separate or opt out of the school district system.
What's wrong with CCSD? Why separate?
You know, I think I think every single person at the school district wants what's best for our kids. I think they all try their best to make sure that happens. It's just too big. It doesn't matter who would be at the helm. It's too big to operate. It doesn't get the results that we need to see. We just had a report from the school district at a recent council meeting, and it continued to reinforce that fact. So we need to do things differently. We need to try alternatives to make sure that our kids aren't last or close to last in the nation in education.
You know, I seem to remember even when I went to school here, there were talks of trying to split up CCSD. It's not a new discussion and not a new issue, and there's always resistance from a variety of different parties, unions, legislature, lawmakers, etc. how do you navigate that? You talked about some of the things that are already in the works, but in terms of actually splitting off, you would have to acknowledge that it's not as easy as just, I would like to split away.
You're right. It's a long process, and it would involve getting a large group of people together all working in the same direction. Since the pandemic and the kids have been having the kids home from school, there's been quite a raising of awareness of the need for something different. I think there are a lot of people now that are thinking along those same lines, whereas maybe there wasn't that groundswell before. And getting those partners together to work toward the same goal, it's going to take partnerships with the private sector, with the public sector, and with parents and families.
You now another issue you brought up: transparency. A long-standing concern from some in the community is the lack of transparency, whether it's public records, whether it's ability to speak at city council meetings before and during the pandemic. This isn't a new concern that's been brought up with the city of Henderson. What do you plan to do to address this?
I think prior to the pandemic, we had already started efforts to approach that. We had council conversations where we would just have kind of an open forum for residents to come and meet with their council people to ask whatever questions. We would bring members of our staff that were in various departments so that they could answer questions. And it was just kind of an open forum so residents were aware of what's happening, what's on the horizon, and to voice their concerns. The mayor did same thing with her March On series, where same thing happened with a specific topic. That needs to continue. As we went through the pandemic, Henderson was I think the only one who had multiple avenues of participation for our public meetings. When they couldn't come in person, we made sure that they could participate electronically. We made sure that they could come on through Zoom or other mechanisms, and we adjusted our entire system of public meetings to make sure that there were multiple opportunities for people to chime in on whatever their concern was.
A lot of what you just mentioned, though, those aren't earth-shattering ideas. Every city had some form of public comment, every municipality virtually during the pandemic. County commissioners have had county conversations for a long, long time. They go out and have coffee around their jurisdiction or whatever. So those don't sound like new ideas. So you're describing things that are already, that some people are criticizing or say isn't enough. Is there anything else that you would like to address?
So moving forward, one of the things that I think people would like to see is they don't get to speak with their council people very often one-on-one. They don't either answer the phone or they don't show up. So that's something that I have done throughout my tenure at the city, and as a council person, I'm actually very open door. If they email me, I respond. If they call me, I respond. If they, show up to my office, I have an open door and I let them in, and they feel like they are heard, and I get feedback on that on a regular basis. So that's something I would like to encourage more of. Something that we recently started is having roundtable discussions with our development community to get feedback on how Henderson is doing and what we could do better to make sure that the process is easier. I've been doing the same thing by reaching out to our business community and making sure that what they are experiencing is what they'd like to see happen, that they are getting the greatest support possible. And I think it's not earth-shattering, but it's simple. To have that one-on-one interaction and actually have communication both ways and have people feel like they've been listened to goes a long way toward making them feel like that we're being transparent.
When the discussion of the Dollar Loan Center, as it's called now, came up and the votes were taken to eventually greenlight the redevelopment of the pavilion, you talk about having people, allow them to have their say. Those who were involved, the rather vocal opposition to that project, would suggest they didn't have their say. How do you address their concerns that, I acknowledge obviously the arena is being built now, but those are lingering concerns that were brought up pretty significantly at that time?
So when those people came out, I actually went out and met with them in person. I walked the site with them. I listened to all of their concerns, and the vast majority of the concerns were potential traffic implications, the visibility that the building might impede their visibility, open space and the ability to interact in the open space, and parking. So all of those ideas I brought back, and those were all incorporated with the building design. So parking has been addressed. There have been more than 1,000 parking spots added to the site without disrupting any of the existing parking. The building will sit actually 9 feet lower than the previous building, so that is not an issue. We've already let out the contract for the traffic, looking at the traffic and how that might have impacts. We're looking at traffic sensing software that will make sure that the traffic moves smoothly. And then we've also made it so before the pavilion, not only was it losing $1 million+ a year and was not usable, half the year, it had just problem after problem after problem. That wasn't sustainable. So this new design will have an open space that has a variety of different uses that can be done on the site, and it will be open 24 hours. It's not behind a fence like the previous one. It's open all the time, and it'll be for the public to enjoy. So I would say to them that all of their concerns were definitely heard, were communicated to the design team, and were enacted.
But the decision was made during the pandemic when cuts were being made, and yet the project is half and half split with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. So can the city still afford this project?
Absolutely. So at the same time as we issued bonds for this project, we refunded or refinanced some of our existing bonds, which saved millions of dollars. And with that savings, the savings we had cover the cost of the new bonds, and so there was really no change in what has being made. And from my experience working at the city, I know the efforts that our finance staff goes through prior to even coming to us for a bond, and the vetting that has been done to make sure that worst case scenario, those bonds can be paid. And that had all happened, and they had made their projections and evaluated what the situation was and how we could cover those bonds. Everything looked great, and it has all played out exactly like they had predicted it would, and we're in a very good position. We'll now have an $80 million building that the city only had to pay $40 million for, and we'll have a professional sports team that does entertainment for their living, programming in the space, so that we have professionals doing that as well. It's the best of both worlds. So
the Dollar Loan Center is one of many developments happening in Henderson. There's the area around the Raiders practice facility. There's Water Street, which obviously, as we were talking before, you are heavily involved in. There are some major developments on the horizon. How do you hope to, or how do you plan to, if you're elected as mayor, continue that growth and draw more development into the city?
Henderson is very fortunate in that we have people coming to us now, and so we can afford to be very choosy about who we allow into the city. And we are looking for what's the highest and best use for the limited space that we have available. And we have a very good vetting process. We have an excellent economic development team, a great redevelopment team. Everybody from community development to fire to police are looking at every project to make sure that it crosses all the T's and dots all the I's and meets all of the goals that we have set for the city, to make sure that we're creating jobs, good paying jobs that have minimal impacts on the surrounding area and add value to our city.
Dan Stewart is your opponent right now for mayor, someone you're familiar with. What do you think sets yourself apart from Mr. Stewart?
I think our experience is what sets us apart the most. I have both the experience, 25 years in the public sector from my work with the city in redevelopment, and then after I retired, I opened my own business, became a small business owner, and worked on the other side of the table, so I could see how city decisions impacted business operations on the private side, and how those could be mitigated. Some of the things that were, decided that maybe have impacts on the business community that weren't thought of. And so I have that both sides of the table experience, and besides that, I'm a longtime native of Henderson, and I have that experience from all the feedback I get from friends and family and people who have lived here a long time. I have a very unique background and very unique experience that I think makes me the best candidate.
So what's your number one priority if you're elected mayor?
Number one priority is public safety. Without public safety, we don't have anything. Nobody's going to want to live here. Nobody's going to want to send their child to school or open a business. We've got to make sure that we have public safety officers in place at enough levels to keep our city safe.
And are the levels where they should be now?
We're getting there. We're getting there. It slowed down for a period of time, but in the new budget we have, we're adding more officers, and we're continuing to look down the line to see what's needed in what areas.
Michelle Romero, good luck in your campaign for mayor of Henderson. We'll keep an eye on how the race goes. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.